Welcome to our series on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In this episode, we aim to unravel the complex history of this long-standing dispute. This is the first of a four-part series where we will delve into the roots of the conflict, explore the pivotal events that shaped the course of this dispute, examine the ongoing issues like refugee crisis and border disputes, and finally, discuss the current state of affairs. Understanding the historical context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is crucial to make sense of the present-day situation. It is a story of two national movements, Zionism and Arab nationalism, clashing over the same piece of land. It's a tale of promises, partitions and wars, a struggle for identity and homeland, and a cycle of violence and retaliation. As we navigate through this intricate narrative, we'll take a look at the key events, the major players, and the international interventions that have played significant roles in shaping this conflict. So join us as we delve into the roots of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict starting from the early 20th century. We will explore how Zionism began, the impact of the Balfour Declaration, and how the British rule in Palestine set the stage for the conflict we see today. Stay tuned as we embark on this historical journey. Welcome to part 2 of our series, titled Part 1, The Roots of the Conflict. Have you ever wondered how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, one of the most prolonged and contentious disputes of our time, came about? The genesis of this conflict dates back to the late 19th century with the onset of the Zionist movement. Zionism was a Jewish nationalist movement with the intention of setting up a Jewish homeland in Palestine, their historical birthplace, their promised land. The concept triggered a rush of Jewish settlers to Palestine, then under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, causing inevitable unrest. The local Arab inhabitants found themselves sharing their land with these new settlers who were bent on establishing their own state. This resulted in rising tensions and laid the groundwork for the conflict we see today. As we delve into the early 20th century, during the throes of World War I, Britain released the Balfour Declaration in 1917. This concise letter, targeted at a leading member of the British Jewish community, endorsed the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. This declaration further intensified the already tense situation between Arabs and Jews in the region. Jumping ahead to the years following the end of World War I, Palestine came under British administration. The Jewish population continued to expand, and along with it, tensions heightened. This period also marked the rise of Arab nationalism. The Arab inhabitants, who had been settled there for centuries, resisted the concept of a Jewish state in their midst. The seeds of conflict were planted during these years. The opposing aspirations of two distinct nationalities, Jewish and Arab, were on a collision course. External factors such as the Balfour Declaration and British rule further aggravated the situation. As we observe, the groundwork for conflict was laid early in the 20th century, with rival national aspirations and external factors fanning the flames. Scene number 3 begins in the year 1947, marking a significant shift in the landscape of the Middle East. The United Nations, keen to broker a resolution to the growing tensions in Palestine, proposed a plan to partition the territory into separate Jewish and Arab states. Jerusalem, the city sacred to 3 world religions, was to be placed under international administration. This plan, however, didn't sit well with everyone. The Arab leaders, in particular, rejected it outright. They demanded a single Arab state that would encompass the entirety of Palestine, a demand that was at odds with the desires of the growing Jewish population. Despite this rejection, the wheels of change were already in motion. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, declared the establishment of the State of Israel. Part 2, Partition Plans and the Birth of Israel, focuses on this new nation that would serve as the Jewish homeland that the Zionist movement had been working towards for decades. The birth of this new state, however, was not met with universal celebration. The very next day, armies from neighboring Arab countries invaded Israel, igniting the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. This war was a fierce and brutal struggle, with both sides fighting not just for land, but for the right to exist. When the dust settled, Israel controlled more territory than it had been allocated under the UN's partition plan. This included areas that had been designated for an Arab state. The war also led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, many of whom were forced to flee their homes. This period marked a pivotal point in the conflict, leading to drastic changes in territorial control and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The Part 2, Partition Plans and the Birth of Israel, sets the stage for the decades of conflict that would follow. A conflict that continues to shape the Middle East to this day. Part 4, Refugee Crisis and Border Disputes. The aftermath of the 1948 war left a lasting impact on the region. A refugee crisis emerged as a direct consequence of the war, with hundreds of thousands of Palestinians displaced from their homes. Many sought refuge in neighboring countries, living in makeshift camps under often dire conditions. Their plight, their longing to return to their ancestral lands in what is now Israel, remains a poignant issue even today, adding an emotional dimension to an already convoluted conflict. Meanwhile, the geographical landscape of the region took on a new form. Egypt held control over the Gaza Strip, a sliver of land along the Mediterranean Sea, densely populated and marked by hardship. Jordan maintained its grip on the West Bank, a territory named for its location on the west bank of the Jordan River. And perched on a plateau in the northeastern corner of the region, the Golan Heights remained under Syrian control. These territories became focal points of tension and conflict. Skirmishes along the borders were not uncommon, particularly between Israel and Syria. The Golan Heights, with its elevated vantage point, was a strategic location. The ongoing disputes over these borders added a new layer of complexity to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, further entangling the web of historical, political, and cultural threads that it. As the years rolled on from 1949 to 1967, the refugee crisis persisted, the borders remained disputed, and the people on both sides of the conflict continued to live under the shadow of uncertainty and fear. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict was not just about land or religion, it was also about people. People displaced from their homes, people living under occupation, people yearning for peace, and people ready to fight for it. With such a potent mix of unresolved issues, contested territories, and human suffering, the region was a powder keg waiting for a spark. With tensions simmering, the stage was set for further conflict. Part 5. The year 1967 marked a turning point in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Tensions had been escalating throughout the early 60s, culminating in an explosive 6 days in June. The Six-Day War, as it came to be known, saw Israel facing off against several Arab armies. In a stunning display of military prowess, Israel emerged victorious, claiming control over large swaths of territory. Among the territories seized were the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. This acquisition significantly expanded Israel's geographical footprint and dramatically altered the landscape of the conflict. Suddenly, Israel found itself in control of a considerable Palestinian population, marking the beginning of an ongoing occupation. Despite the victory, the occupation of these territories has been a source of contention, both domestically and internationally. The West Bank and Gaza Strip, home to a large Palestinian population, have been subject to Israeli military law ever since. This has led to widespread criticism, with many asserting that the conditions imposed resemble those of apartheid. Moreover, Jewish settlements have been established within these territories, further fueling the conflict. These settlements, protected by Israeli civilian law, stand in stark contrast to the surrounding Palestinian communities, exacerbating tensions and fostering resentment. The international community has largely opposed the ongoing occupation. Numerous United Nations resolutions have been passed, condemning Israel's actions and calling for an end to the occupation. Yet, despite the criticism and calls for peace, the occupation persists. The acquisition of the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights brought with it its own set of challenges. While Israel returned the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt as part of the 1979 peace treaty, the status of the Golan Heights remains disputed, with Syria asserting its claim over the territory. This brings us to the present day, with the conflict still unresolved and the future uncertain. The lands seized during the Six-Day War remain a focal point of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, their fate tied to the elusive pursuit of peace in the region. So, where does this bring us in the current scenario? From the late 19th century Zionist movement through key events such as the Balfour Declaration, the UN Partition Plan, and the Six-Day War, we've journeyed through the complex topography of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's an issue deeply and multifaceted, punctuated by moments of calm and episodes of violence. The refugee issue, territorial conflicts, and the ongoing occupation all contribute to its complicated nature. As we move into Scene 6, our conclusion, it's still uncertain how this conflict will be resolved. But understanding the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is critical to shaping its future.